Welcome to Round Hill Radio, the podcast from Round Hill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How you doing?
So far, so good.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. So today is a pretty special episode.
Yes.
It is our last episode of season 6.
Wow.
Which is kind of incredible. So welcome.
Well, welcome back.
Welcome back. I have to say I would be tempted to do like, you know how people on YouTube have these like clickbait titles.
Yes.
To be like, this is the end.
Right.
It's not. Don't panic. So season 7 will begin mid-September. September-ish.
Yeah.
So obviously summer break is a thing.
We felt called to take a pause.
I see what you did there.
Right?
I see what you did there. Because today we're going to talk about calling and just discuss some things we're feeling called about.
Yeah.
Called to. You just came back from a sort of workshop, seminar, conference about calling.
Yeah.
So we have tons to talk about today. But we just wanted to be very clear about like, if you don't get a new episode, because you're not going to get a new episode for about 8 to 10 weeks.
It's coming.
It'll be here. I'm on maternity leave, so I definitely won't be here.
Yes.
And I haven't taught you how to use all the tech.
I'm called to stay away from technology.
You know, I think that's good.
Right?
We all have our
It's
strengths.
good for everybody.
In our house, I don't do plumbing.
See?
You have to know what's in your ministry and what's not in your ministry. And plumbing is not in my ministry.
Tech's not in my wheelhouse, so keep a distance. A pause is a good thing.
A pause is a great thing. Yeah. So we will come back refreshed. Well, you will.
Yeah. That's very visionary of you to say so.
No, my expectations are pretty low for my energy levels, but that's okay. It's fine. It's fine. As my friend Catherine Harsh would say, it's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. So I guess start us off. Do you want to give us a little background about sort of this whole calling thing? Because it's been a conversation we've been having for a few years now. I think we have some podcasts about it.
Yes.
Some of the 130 we've done.
We've addressed it.
We have.
Here and there. But it's always new. I think that's the exciting thing about it, right? The calling, the sense of calling always evolves. It was such a wonderful moment. I guess it's about 4 or 5 years ago now, when I had reached out to a wonderful man named John Roberto to have lunch, just to kind of reconnect. John had helped us at Round Hill Community Church to develop a year-long program called A Life Worth Living. Yes. And it was such a rich program. So every month we had one theme like generosity, and then we had materials online and so on. It was just a very gratifying experience. And I was very grateful to John. So I had offered to take him out for lunch, and we met for lunch, and he said, "I've got some news for you." And I said, "Really?" And he said that he, as part of an organization called Vibrant Faith, which has worked for years to help congregations develop faith formation programs for all ages in their congregations, had decided to take a little bit of a turn in a new direction and to help congregations also develop what they were calling a culture of calling. And so John said that he and his colleagues had chosen 24 churches across the country to participate in this new venture, and they chose Round Hill Community Church, and we actually turned out to be the only non-denominational church in the 24.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
So all others were connected with historical denominations. We then this process unfolded for a period of 4 years, and we had wonderful resources. We received a grant of $12,000. We used that to bring some guest speakers, to have book studies, to have people come in and offer some direction to our church school. So it was very, very rich. And then I had an opportunity to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, to meet with many of the people who participated in the grant. And we reflected, what did we learn? What would we have done differently? This was all sponsored by the Lilly Endowment, Indianapolis-based foundation. And Lily wanted to find out, what we had learned. And one thing that was especially gratifying is that the leaders of Vibrant Faith put together this beautiful booklet, and it's still in process, but it's kind of a recap. And they've chose to focus on 7 churches out of the group. And Round Hill is one of those churches.
Oh, that's so neat.
And so when we did a kind of final survey of those who participated at Round Hill Community Church, and we interviewed other members of the congregation, those statements found their way into this booklet. And it's really lovely. It's a great tribute, I think, to the congregation. So, I think that the exciting thing of this is that it has changed our church. We have access now to the language of calling in a way that we didn't before, and we're more comfortable using that term, even though we're still always trying to understand it.
Are you hearing it just throughout the week more?
I am. I now hear, I heard someone say not too long ago about our congregation, I really feel, this was her speaking, I really feel like we found our calling. And I don't think that language would have been used in that way years ago.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. And calling, and I also had someone approach me recently to say that they've appreciated the way that we have framed the discussion of calling. In years, maybe decades past, when people have thought about a calling, they're usually talking about their career.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And sometimes people will say, well, I think you missed your calling, which is not like a great thing to hear.
Ouch.
Yeah. Sort of missed the boat on something.
Yeah.
But calling can mean a decisive, transforming moment that puts us on a new path, maybe for a lifetime, if not for many years.
Sure.
Right? That can happen. That used to also be called a vocation,
Right.
although that term has been associated in the minds of many people with our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, right? Like a priestly vocation or a nun.
Right.
So calling has been a little bit strange to us, which I think is good in a sense. We have to sort of figure it out, right? So one of those ways of understanding it is something that's long-term. But a calling, as one of our members put it recently, can shift almost from minute to minute. It's everything we're doing during the day when we're thinking about, gee, what am I being led to do in all kinds of ways? Preparing nourishment for the family, right? Or for ourselves, or deciding what kind of art we're wanting to look at, or what kind of music we want to listen to. Yeah. And in fact, music's a really great example, because I hear people say all the time, like, oh, I used to listen to this kind of music and I felt drawn to start doing this.
Right.
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 And so I think that's a calling. I think it's something calling to us. And why not pay attention to it?
I'm really fascinated by your perspective on this, because it seems like there's something more connected about it. That there's something you're more in tune with yourself.
Yes.
You're more in tune with, there's an element, I think, which can be very tempting in life, that maybe the pandemic interrupted, but we sort of just like went day to day, sort of as did the to-do list, went to bed, woke up, did the to-do list, went to bed, and this sort of, I don't mean to say mundane, but like there's an element of you do what you do and that's life, versus listening to your gut, your intuition, what you're drawn to, what the spirit and energies around you are saying, and then also listening to what maybe doesn't serve you. There's a lot there that when you are more open can be really exciting.
So the phrase that we hear you using when you're introducing our podcast about finding the holy in the ordinary, right? To me, that is all about calling.
Really?
Yeah. That it's listening for that voice through all the ordinary moments. And that's why I think I would almost prefer that we understood calling in that sense before we understand it as something big and decisive and, you know.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that all the time. So I just remember a conversation we had once with the Reverend Tanya Campen, who works who has devoted her life really to creating faith formation programs for. She works in Texas with the Rio, Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church, but she talks about connection with God. That's the whole point of faith formation. Whatever you do to help you connect with God, if that's standing out by a tree in your yard, because that's your centering place, or it's listening to that one piece of music at the beginning of the day, that's the connection. And I think what I hear you saying, Leslie, is that connection is the calling. We're really connected at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And it's about who you are, who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of following. And then I would say, for at least in my own experience, making the decision to follow that energy.
Yes.
Because sometimes
Perfect.
sometimes I'll get this weird urge to go and do something, but I'm like, but I don't need to do that for another 2 weeks. And I've learned about myself that no, now is the time to do that thing.
Right.
Because if I wait 2 weeks, I'll be like, oh, I don't want to do the thing.
Yeah.
But like following the energy of where you're drawn on, a task or something creative or whatever.
Yes.
Is exciting. And I feel like you have always encouraged us as a staff to do that, to sort of follow the energy.
Well, I love the way you describe this. And I do think there are all these, there can be many turning points in a day where we feel the energy moving us, and we might initially have some resistance to it.
Right.
That, by the way, I think that resistance is fascinating. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, right.
We might describe it as procrastination or
Right. Sure.
laziness or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is like this little pushback we get. And I just find that interesting because it's as if there's another part of us that's kind of pushing against the calling in another direction. So I'm doing a lot of thinking about that, but I think you're absolutely right about this, the way this energy emerges. And I had a very, I don't know how to describe it. It was impactful, I guess, experience during the pandemic, towards the spring. I felt like there were times in the evening when I might normally have maybe continued to do a little bit of work, when the calling was to go completely the other direction. And yet I found that I was at sea. Like, I don't know what to do, I'm feeling called away from work because
Sure.
I can tend to be
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
we don't want to
Good
we don't
for
want to
you.
go there.
Good for you.
Right.
Good
And
for
then
you
and
being
yet
pulled
moving in
away.
the other direction. And it's almost like there were times when I felt like I could just go and stand in a room and just that's it.
That's okay.
Right. And it took me a while to figure out, maybe that is exactly what I'm being called to do.
I
go
love that.
and you go in that room and stand there for a while.
Just stand there for a minute.
Simmer down. Right. I think
Yes.
it's kind of like the pause we're taking over the summer. You step back for a time and then re-engage, because things are still interesting things. The Spirit's always working in us. I really believe that.
Yeah.
It's a sort of inward partner. And so to follow those movements of energy, the way you describe them beautifully during the day, that's a spiritual life.
And there's something very dynamic about it. It puts me in mind of a friend who used to say, don't should yourself.
Right.
Which I always love. And I feel like for me, in those moments when I am resisting my energy going towards something, I'm like, no, but I should be, or I should. And then I'm like, oh, well, I literally just created that restriction for myself.
Yeah.
I can go and do the thing that I really want to do. I feel called to do. I feel like I have creativity around doing now, even if it's not, if it's a deadline 2 weeks from now or whatever, but it means there's something in my mind or my heart I want to give to this project right now.
Yeah. I do think my experience is if we do feed ourselves in that way, we do feed that part of ourselves enough, some of that resistance starts to die down, and it becomes a little bit easier to follow that movement that's pulling us in whatever particular direction.
Yeah.
I was really fascinated. This was about 4 years ago when I was on sabbatical, and I had an opportunity to drive down to North Carolina. Again, that's pretty much, I guess, what I do. What I do, going to North Carolina.
That's all right.
So I was going down there for a conference, and as I went down, I tried to eat in like little diners, things like that, find out of the way places. And I didn't do this all the time, but many times I would say to people, I'm just kind of traveling through, and is there anything interesting to see around here? And people always love to be engaged in that way. And then I would say, one of the things I'm just trying to figure out right now as I travel is kind of what I'm drawn to. Is that a question you're asking? And I will tell you, you have to be really careful about asking that question because people want to talk about it.
Oh, really?
And I can still see the image of this one lovely young woman. I think it was in Appomattox, Virginia. And I was sitting at this little out-of-the-way diner, and I just happened to ask that question, and she just did not stop.
Oh, wow.
She was being drawn to a lot of things.
Oh, good for her.
And it was wonderful, and I thought, wow, first of all, that she's willing to kind of share that with a stranger.
Sure.
But I do find that, and I think there's part of that is that you're sharing it with a stranger, someone who's not familiar and, never going to see again.
Right.
But it's something that we do like to talk about, the things that we're drawn to.
Right.
It's a more positive, uplifting theme than the things that we're trying to flee or fight in our lives.
And I feel like Round Hill Media, as a sort of umbrella of all of our content creation, I guess is probably an easy way to describe it, has continued to kind of be like that. Like we kind of say, we keep looking at all of our various things and being like, well, what are we drawn to doing?
Right.
And what are we doing because that's what we've been doing and checking the boxes. And I think that's really, for me, an exciting prospect about coming back in the fall. And saying, okay, so, having a little bit of a break, what do we want to keep? What do we want to, reinvent or play with or play around with or whatever? I'm particularly excited about that.
Yeah. I think you bring many gifts to us, Leslie, but that's one of them is that question, which I can hear in my little ear here, which is that how could we make this a little different, this thing that we're doing? How can we add a dimension to it? How can we be a little bit more creative? I think those questions are helpful on the calling side because we're giving some added encouragement to our inner spirit, which in turn then wants to kind of noodle away on those things.
Right.
And then other ideas kind of burst up, out of the blue. And then we follow those wherever those might lead. There's one thing I just want to return to that you said earlier, which is equally important to the creative side, which is what do we want to step away from?
Yeah.
What's not working anymore, And I think one of the things that churches must learn, I hate to put it that emphatically, but going forward, we cannot afford to direct our energies in places where they are no longer fruitful or productive.
Yeah.
And we knew before the pandemic that there were areas of the church, of the church in general, the church's life, that just weren't working.
Right.
And the church in particular can be just so fierce about protecting certain kinds of traditions, whether or not they're working. Right. And I think we have to be really decisive about this going into the future. We want to protect our energy. Guarding the fire is an important vocation in life because we don't have unlimited energy.
Right.
And burnout, I think, comes from doing things. It's not a condition of overwork, has been my experience. It's a condition of doing something that's no longer satisfying and nurturing.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we can work hard, really hard, at things that engage us.
Oh, yeah.
And often over long periods of time and great sacrifice.
Yeah.
But if you give someone something to do that is it's against the grain of their calling and it's not fulfilling and it's not productive, it will kill the spirit.
Yeah.
So
I completely connect with that. You do things that you feel like you should be doing, or again, there's that word again, or, you feel like, oh, there's so many reasons to do something and your spirit is fighting it.
Yeah.
I can think of a strong handful of examples in my own life here. But your spirit is fighting it and you look around, you're like, nothing's wrong. Nothing's bad here.
Right.
But I'm fighting it so hard.
Yeah.
And then you find they call it passion projects, or you find something that you want to do. And it's like you blink and it's been 6 hours.
I know.
And you're like, where did well, I don't know. That was fun though. And those are the times I find myself at least thinking about, like, again, around home media, where it's like 11 o'clock at night, I'm still on my computer and I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm like happy as a clam. Like,
It's a great feeling, isn't it?
you know, it's really fun.
In the flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting that flow state with, you know, especially with these sort of creative projects that I think, for us and for what we're doing here, I feel like this kind of the sky's the limit, and we still have a playfulness about it. We still have like a, hey, let's try it.
Right.
You know?
Yep. That's a good sign.
We'll just go, I don't know what's going to happen. Do you know what's going to happen? And I love that
Yeah.
about what we create here, because there's nothing, we're not holding anything too tightly. I will say I sort of hold the podcast tightly. Like, you'd have to pry that from my golden fingers. Like, this isn't going anywhere. But, you know, sort of other things around it that have sort of, you know, and we've had some content sort of develop from necessity that, you know, we let go of, and all is well. I also, one thing I want to think about looking at the fall is creating time and space to back away and sit and plan and get that like 100-foot view. Because I feel like, I mean, especially this year is going to be such an unusual year with me being literally unavailable for 3 months. And then it looks like I'll probably be back like right at Rally Day.
Perfect.
Which is perfect timing. It's almost as if I planned it, but I didn't. But I'm also like, I'm a little concerned, because I'm like, but then we'll get whacked with Rally Day. Right. And then it's just like, off we go to Christmas. And so I'm really hopeful that like you and Shannon and I can find a time to be like, pause.
Yes.
Back away, like get some stuff together. And we're actually planning on creating, we have a space right here. We're creating like a planning space.
Yeah.
Like a set aside brainstorming space for us, where we can leave up Post-it notes and I can color code to my heart's content.
I can't wait to see it.
It's going to be great. It's a big whiteboard. You know, and we can have, you know, pull up content on the computer and like just play and explore together, you know. And so I'm putting it on I haven't told him this before.
Surprise.
I was like, I'll spring this on you now. But I think that's, you know, stepping back is also sometimes, because like it was like we were talking about calling. Like, it's one of those things of you can just kind of keep moving. Yes. Or you can pause and listen. And I think I'm excited about hopefully creating some opportunities to do that on like more regularly. Yes. You know?
I was listening recently to the reflections of someone who's a trainer of coaches for clergy.
Okay.
And he was saying that the greatest threat to his, I guess I would say the vitality and the depth of his work is the absence of thinking time. I would like to believe that if there's anything we learned, you know, about ourselves during the pandemic, it's that we really need to be thoughtful about everything we engage in the future. Yeah. And you're really talking about not just, you know, paying lip service to that, but creating a physical space where it can happen. And over the years, it's funny, I'm thinking about a lot of comments I've heard from people in my congregations who have said, you know, yeah, that's my thinking chair over there.
I love a good thinking chair.
Right?
It's good.
Or yeah, I go out there in the patio, and that's where I like to think. I don't hear that as much. I used to hear that all the time.
Really?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I heard it in my family. I heard it from friends. And we're losing that because life's getting flattened out, right? It's like one continuous line, as opposed to these dips, right? Where you're taking a step back and don't bother me during my thinking time. I really need that. So I think that's very much a part of the calling culture. And that's creating a culture where that's not just, you know, likely to happen, but it's really built into who we are.
It's like a necessity.
It is.
Of the pattern of life. I love that, because thinking about like how you were saying sometimes the evening hours get sort of dragged into work.
Yep.
And then the weekends get dragged into work. And then the summer gets dragged, and it's like, it's just, you end up and you like, when was the last day I didn't check my email?
Right. Put the phone away for the
last
whole
hour I didn't check my email is probably more accurate.
Right. Exactly.
And it's, I think that's we sort of accidentally hit upon this idea of really just taking a step back as being crucial to listening for that calling. I think it's such an interesting thing.
I'm with you.
All right.
Here's to the creative pause.
Here's the creative pause, everybody. So we hope, since you won't be having this 20 minutes a week, for your taking up so much of your time, that you have a wonderful creative pause this summer. We wish you just thinking time and dreaming time. And we look forward to being back with you in the fall, as ever. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillcommunitychurch.org.